Moving on to the next section of your packet, I'd like to briefly summarize the activity of Enforcement Division during the past fiscal year, which ended on June 30th. The first entry in this section is on page 88 and shows that Enforcement Division opened 19,158 complaint investigations during fiscal year 21-22. This is a 16% increase over the previous fiscal year, which indicates that the COVID-related decrease in consumer file complaints is ending. Unfortunately, the increase in complaints, coupled with vacant investigator positions, have contributed to an increase in the backlog of complaints. The division's goal is to hold the number of pending complaints to 3,620. The number of aged cases, that is those over 270 days from date of receipt, to 100. At the end of July, the number of pending investigations was 4,747, and the number of aged cases was 261. To address the backlog of complaints and the increase in aged cases, the enforcement management team is working diligently to ensure that vacant positions are promptly refilled with qualified candidates. Overtime has been authorized to help address the backlog of incoming complaints, and enforcement supervisors are working very closely with their investigators, monitoring caseloads and production, and providing assistance through regular case reviews. However, if incoming consumer complaints continue to exceed complaint handling ability, implementation of board-approved process changes and investigation priorities may be necessary. A few of the division's accomplishments for the fiscal year are also on page 88 and include over $22 million in restitution returned to financially injured consumers, 506 cases referred for criminal prosecution, 218 accusations filed for license revocation or suspension, 1,551 administrative citations issued, almost $1.9 million in civil penalties collected, and 354 letters of admonishment issued. Starting on page 89 of your packet, you will find summary of activity by CSLB's statewide investigative fraud team. The special investigators assigned to SWIFT handle proactive enforcement for CSLB. They conduct undercover sting operations, perform enforcement sweeps, and respond to leads at active construction sites. In fiscal year 21-22, SWIFT investigators conducted 17 undercover sting operations, participated in 337 days of enforcement sweeps, and responded to 996 leads. And I just wanted to comment, those numbers are quite a bit lower than normal due to COVID. And they should be increasing considerably over the next year or two. In total, SWIFT completed 3,634 investigations, which resulted in 390 referrals to local DAs for criminal prosecution, 598 citations issued, 129 letters of admonishment, 319 stop orders, which require an immediate halt to the use of employee labor by contractors who did not have a valid workers' compensation insurance policy, and 1,386 advisory notices issued for minor violations. On page 90, a table shows that during the first half of calendar year 2021, SWIFT and partner agencies in the Joint Enforcement Strike Force recovered or resolved over $10 million in outstanding liabilities owed to CSLB and partner agencies. Also, on page 90, you will see that SWIFT again participated in an annual nationwide enforcement operation coordinated by NASCLA, the National Association of State Contractor Licensing Agencies. This year, California and 11 other partnering states conducted widespread enforcement operations from June 6 to June 24. During this event, SWIFT investigators conducted 3 undercover stings, made 53 sweeps of construction sites, working in 20 counties throughout California. SWIFT's efforts resulted in 142 legal actions and 40 stop orders. Finally, I'd like to mention an item that is not in your packet. On August 17th, Swift investigators partnered with the Paradise Police Department and the Butte County District Attorney's Office to conduct an undercover sting in the burn area of Paradise, where the campfire occurred in November of 2018. 7 suspects showed up to provide bids on a variety of jobs, including concrete work and tree removal. 6 of the 7 suspects were referred for criminal prosecution, including 3 who were arrested and booked into jail for felony contracting without a license in a declared disaster area. Felony charges have also been recommended for a 4th suspect. Although it's been 4 years since the deadly campfire, Enforcement Division remains committed to protecting survivors from further victimization in Paradise and in all other disaster areas within the state. And at this point, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Mark unless anybody has any questions.
Actually, I do have a question. A while back when you were talking about the goals and the contemplated changes that you think CSLB might be forced to make if we don't have the staffing levels and some other expectations changed. Could you elaborate on that?
Certainly. Well, I go back to what we've had to do, unfortunately, in the past, where we've had to take steps such as referring consumers to small claims court if the once we determine the financial injury is within the realm of small claims court jurisdiction. We've also had to really look at our prioritization list of complaints and focus more on the ones at the top of the list, where elderly people have been victimized, where there's theft, where there's significant financial injury, as opposed to less offensive violations such as not having your exact name style on your vehicle, that type of thing.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, if I may just add a couple of comments. The board has previously approved a investigation prioritization guidelines for staff to use. If, in fact, we need to look at that and look for opportunities to streamline our investigation, reduce certain types of complaint investigations, we would go to the enforcement committee for their review and then ultimately back to the board. So right now we're just looking at various ideas, and as Steve mentioned, one could be directing consumers where they have a small financial injury to small claims court. Something else the board has done in the past is they've looked at having the SWIFT unit handle non-licensee investigations, even if they're filed by consumers. We've also relied on our arbitration program to help resolve even more complaints than they're doing today. So those would be just some of the ideas that we'd bring back to the board if necessary. But at this point, we're not there yet, and really optimistic that by your approval and hiring a consultant, that can help us to look for workflow improvements that we might be able to implement to make our investigations a little bit more streamlined.
Thank you, Dave. And I'd like to make a couple comments. I will say this as a board member, this is why I joined the board. When you hear these stories of elderly being abused and our CSLB SWIFT team taking action and finding these bad players, there's a lot of good contractors out there, but there's these bad players that we need to make an example of for better purposes, like this particular instance where the person's going to get locked up. It's something where CSLB is doing everything they can, and that's why I'm proud to serve on this board because of those reasons. And thank you for you and your team, Steve. So moving onward, at this point, I'm going to go back to agenda item E3, update on the solar energy system restitution program. The final agenda item for Enforcement Division is an update on CSLB's Solar Energy System Restitution Program, better known as SESRP. We're really good at acronyms here, which begins on page 94 of your packet. This program was created by Assembly Bill 137 in 2021, and it is designed to provide financial restitution to homeowners who were financially harmed by a solar contractor and who are without other recourse. The program is funded by $5 million from the state's general fund, with up to $1 million allocated to pay for CSLB's administrative costs as needed. The program became fully operational in late 2021. The SESRP has received increasing publicity, and program activity has ramped up in recent months, as shown on the table on page 94. As of August 12th, there's been 307 claims have been received from consumers. 107 of those claims have been approved. Over $1.4 million in restitution has been approved for payment. There are 160 claims that are pending, many waiting for additional documentation, and 38 claims have been closed without payment. The SESRP has been extremely well received by the victims of solar-related fraud, many of whom have given up any hopes of recovering their lost funds. On page 95 of your packet, you will see a very nice thank you email recently received from one of the program's satisfied claimants. Is there any board comment on this program?
Okay, I have another question. If we have the 4 million, and I remember when this started, we have the 4 million, and there is a lot of publicity about the restitution. What will happen with any backlog of claims when we run out of the 4 million? Is there a renewal of that money that we have advertised that would be going to consumers?
Dave?
Yeah, so the Public Utility Commission decision that relates to this requires a public hearing that will be conducted by PG&E at such time. So we're in the process, Mariah, thank you, working very hard with them to put that together. And we're looking at having this public meeting. I think it's maybe in November is kind of our target date. But we have had a lot of publicity. Just really want to thank the staff that have worked on this program. We've done media in Spanish, California. We've done English. We've also gone through our enforcement cases and to look for potential victims, that we became aware of through the complaint filing process. And we've sent letters to them. We've done a lot of outreach, phone calls, trying to encourage them to file a claim. But in answer to your question, PG&E is being tasked with having a public meeting to determine if there's a need for continuous funding for this purpose.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions? No further questions.
I have a question. Are we getting in contact with building departments and finding out, the contractors that had these licenses that pulled building permits that, ultimately didn't complete or finish their jobs for the solar, and reaching out to those owners and homeowners as well?
That is a great idea. I think with public affairs, Samantha, it might be something we can do. We have letters that explain the program. So if we could get the California Building Association to send something out to all of the building departments, I think that's a wonderful idea.
Different disciplines, we can, go through and figure out exactly what, or by their name or by their license, what they've taken out. And then in contact to see what has been completed or is still open or expired and never was completed. So there's steps that could be done that might help out. Just thought.
Is there any public comment on our enforcement division update? I think we're going to have one public comment. Can you please state your name, please, for the record?
Hi, Jody Costello. And I just want to say about the contracting licensing and everything that you're doing to educate them, which is great. But if you're a less than ethical individual, that sometimes isn't going to be the answer for those kinds of people. I just work with too many consumers who work with these kinds of people that you highlighted and spotlighted. One of the things that I do, and I'm real big about, is consumer education. So somehow, because people don't know what they don't know, and that's what gets them into trouble every single time. So, doing something for the consumer, highlighting the need, and showing people some of the problems that they encounter with these individuals is important. I can't tell you how many times I get emails, and these people are shocked, and I feel bad for them, but I kind of run them through the course of what they need to do. So for me, consumer education should not be by the wayside. That needs to be up there as far as I'm concerned, but also along with contractor education. So I don't know what that looks like. I know I teach an online course, but can't always reach those people. So, and you guys are in a perfect position to do that. So anyways, happy to work with you if you need something along those lines. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one more public comment, and then Alan Guy.
Yeah, Nick Freschetti, National Contractor License Agency. It was a great idea. I talked to contractors all over the country every week that are semi-retired, retired. They're very passionate about the industry. They would like to be involved. If your local building departments could reach out in their communities to find those people, that might help bring something together.
You could answer that question, Steve, so it's kind of,
You
then
know,
Alan.
Through the chair, thank you, Mark. Unfortunately, that is, to answer that, we try to put that out there, but the education is the hardest thing, because they don't know to come to the building departments or to the inspectors or just even bring it up. So they think the best way to go is small claims court or contract state license board, and they don't get involved where it's the first step. And by the time it comes back to us, it's either too late or they're gone and they can't get a hold of them, or it's happened to somebody else, and then they take off. So, yeah, I mean, that's a great idea, and if they can reach out and we can have some kind of, the keyword, education, back and forth and have that out there, that would be great. So maybe it's something everybody can join in together with.
Yeah, just one comment I had is, could we add some statistics by period on this so we could see if the complaints are going up or down by year or by quarter, whether there's more fraud going on in the solar industry?
As we've been tracking our solar complaints for the last 4 years, and that's increased to 130. So that's not asked for us, and that wasn't the goal. The goal is to reduce complaints, but that could be because there's more solar work going on perhaps today than there was in the last few years, or it's because of the solar restitution fund. Although the increase to 130 are consumer filed complaints, they're not solar claims. Those are handled separately. So, regrettably, we're finding that we have more complaints today than we've had in the last 4 years. We did have a meeting we have a quarterly meeting with the Public Utility Commission, the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation, it used to be DBO. So we meet with them to talk about solar. And the CALSA, the Solar Association, was in attendance at that meeting. And I asked them, I said, we need to have a meeting with you and your members to talk about what we can do to reduce consumer complaints. We need to look at contractors that have been receiving more than, say, a certain number of complaints in a given year. And we've already started that effort. It was interesting. We brought in a contractor, I'm not going to name her today, but they'd received quite a few complaints in the last 12 months. And so we brought in their officers and explained to them, and Steve, you were part of that, we explained to them that this cannot continue. You need to change your customer service practices. You need satisfied customers. We don't need all these complaints to try to help you resolve. And they have changed their business model, and the feedback I've received from our enforcement staff has been very positive. In fact, they had a case down in Southern California where it took a substantial amount of money to resolve it. They were given a time to do that, and they made that happen. It's one thing to be receiving a complaint, but you need to resolve that at our intake mediation center. We don't want these complaints going out to the field. So I would just answer that the complaints have gone up, but we're taking steps to reduce them, to work with these contractors, change their business practice. And if they can't do that, then we are filing an accusation to suspend or revoke their license. So we're taking a very hard approach at this point.
Thank you, Dave. Is there, answer your question, Alan? Any?
Finally, I promise. On the complaints that you get that you receive, finally, I promise. On the complaints that you get that you receive, are they broken down into like just somebody taking the money and leaving and not completing the work, or they started the work and they went halfway and they haven't done it, or they completed the work and it's just such a shoddy job that it's just every 6 weeks you're calling somebody out, or it's not working correctly, or it's not passing, or is it broken down, or is it?
Complaints. So it's just not one thing. Now, a lot of them are not that significant. It's just that you have an inverter that's not functioning, or it needs some minor repair work, but yet the contractor's not receptive to the phone call to come back and to fix it. But others are quite serious, and that's where you have money that's received by the contractor, and sometimes the work's not even performed. And so those are very serious, and that's what we prioritize. But what we have now is programming. We have programming where we can identify the number of complaints these solar contractors are receiving. And for those that have the more minor ones, those are the ones we want to correct. For the others that have a predatory business practice, they don't need to be in the marketplace. So that's a different approach.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, no, when this program was first consumers in it, so far it's shown that some of the monies that were unrightfully taken from them. So if there's no other board comments, then that will conclude the Enforcement Committee report, or Enforcement report. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Steve and committee. We're going to take a brief 10-minute break before we resume with item F, licensing. So that would bring us back here. It's 2:18, so we'll see you back at 2:28. We've got most of our folks back? We're going to go ahead and get started again, beginning with item number F on our agenda, licensing. So leading us today through licensing and testing is going to be David De La Torre in the absence of Chair Jim Ruane, who, as you know, has an excused absence. So with that, I'll turn it over to David to walk through.
Good afternoon. My name is David De La Torre, and I'll be providing the licensing day on behalf of Board Member Jim Ruane. Also, Licensing Manager Carol Gagnon is covering for Licensing Chief Fode Garagos-Lu, I hope I pronounced those names right, who is unable to be at the meeting today. Let's begin with the licensing and testing objectives on page 100. Item 1.1 is to assess barriers to licensure for women and minorities and create an outreach plan to community colleges, construction management programs, labor unions, and workforce development groups to increase licensee diversity and create a better understanding of applicants and licensees. Staff reports that progress with this project is ongoing in a joint coordination with the Executive Division's outreach goals for employee recruitment and the Public Affairs Office outreach efforts on the importance of licensing. Item 1.2 is to study and appraise existing and prospective reciprocity agreements to determine if they are needed, and if so, whether qualifying criteria for reciprocity agreements be updated or codified legislatively. As will be detailed in a few minutes, staff is consistently reviewing requests from other states regarding reciprocity and has developed a plan to review all out-of-state examinations with the Department of Consumer Affairs before bringing them to the board's licensing committee. Item 1.3 is to continue automating this and streamlining all online application, licensing, and examination processes to improve processing efficiency. Staff reports that the executive and IT divisions met with third-party software developer in July to review new software that will significantly automate licensing division process. Staff will update the board on whether it recommends selecting this vendor separately. Staff is very close to completing the full automation of the home improvement salesperson application. For strategic plan item 1.4, I will turn to Licensing Division Manager Carol Gagnon to provide some updates.
Assess and report on how to technologies into the licensure process to ensure licensees continue to represent reliability and contracting excellence. Now, this is something Testing Division has done in part for a long time, but we're going to add more to it. So what we've done is we revise every single one of our exams every 5 to 7 years, every single one. And to do this, we use subject matter experts, active licensed contractors in the trade, people who are working in the field. We use them at every step of the way. So the first step that we take is our occupational analysis process, and what we do as part of that is recruit from those active licensed contractors in that trade, and we do job audits with them. We interview them and call them up, spend 1 to 2 hours with them, asking them, what steps do you take in planning? What do you do to estimate? What kind of things do you install? What areas do you cover in your trade? What kind of things do you concentrate on? Is it commercial? Is it industrial? Is it residential? Also, how do you install things? How do you repair things? What kind of repairs do you get called upon to make? What kind of safety factors apply to your work? And what's new? What's coming up in the next 5 years? What's going to change in your trade? What are the manufacturers putting out there in advertising that we need to know to cover on the test? And what new laws, regulations, procedures are coming up as well. So we do that in the job audit process. Then what we do is we have those active licensed contractors work with us to create the surveys. And if you are a licensed contractor, you've probably seen one of our surveys, at least one, if not more. And those surveys cover all the tasks that we understand that contractors perform in that trade, all the knowledge that they need to know. And what we do is have those active licensed contractors work with us to make sure we covered everything, that we've got the full breadth of the trade, that we've covered the full scope of it. And after we've created that survey, we send it to our DCA legal counsel to review it, to make sure we've covered everything, and there's nothing outside of there. And we also send it to our classification deputy as well, to make sure that there's nothing outside the scope of the trade. What does happen is stuff does pop up. Things come up. Contractors we have 4 or 5 people say, yeah, we do this, yes, we do this. And we say, all right, but classification deputy and licensing is saying it's outside the scope. So oftentimes what we'll do is we'll agree, we put it on their survey, put it out there and see how many people are actually doing this in that trade. Is it just these 5 guys that happen to volunteer? Okay, maybe it's not a big deal. Maybe they're doing it with a different classification that they have. Or is a huge number? Is there a really large number of people doing this? In which case, we bring it back to the classification deputy and say, hey, listen, we put this out there in this survey and a lot of people are doing this. Maybe we need to do something about it. So what we're going to do now, and remember, this survey is going to either the entire population of active licensed contractors in that trade. For some of our small trades, that's everybody. For some of our larger trades like the B and the A, the really, really huge ones, we send it out to a sample of about 3,000. We use a sample throughout the whole state of California to make sure we cover the bigger cities, the smaller rural areas, all parts of the state. And then when the survey gets back, if we find out that there's something that they have earmarked as possibly outside the scope, that there's a lot of people doing, what we're going to do is discuss it and bring it forward to the licensing committee to say, we discovered this, we see this, this is happening. Would we like to change this in regulation? Is this something we want to issue an industry bulletin and say, no, we don't want to do this anymore? So that's how we're going to deal with that in the future to handle these issues.
Thank you, Carol. Item 1.5, to partner with Public Affairs Office to streamline and eliminate jargon on the CSLB licensing web pages, handouts, publications, and forms to reduce user confusion and processing times. Staff reports that 2 analysts are assigned to coordinate efforts to review and improve CSLB licensing publications. Finally, strategic plan item 1.6 is to complete the examination administration outsource, transition, and assess remote testing options. I will invite Carol Gagnon back to speak on this item.
All CSLB test centers are closed, and as you saw, we've already been able to end the leases on some of those, adding to a cost savings. And all of our exams are administered now, they're still written in-house, but they're all administered out at PSI exams, test centers. So this means our candidates now have a choice of 20 test centers throughout the state of California. They can test in the evenings if they want. They can test in the weekends if they want. So the candidates have been very, very pleased about this. And they, once they get approval to test, they can pick their own test date and time. So they can work it around their own personal schedule and what works best for this. So we've really received a lot of positive feedback about that.
Would that be appropriate, Counselor?
Yeah, on any sub-agenda item, you can ask for discussion if there's discussion.
Any
Yes.
questions thus far from the board?
I
Any
do.
questions?
I have a question. I
Susan?
know there were elaborate language, and how did we transfer those policies that we had where you could bring in an interpreter and they had to be within a year and all of those rules? Did those apply? Did we carry those over as policies to PSI?
Yes, that is an excellent question, and that is something that we considered a lot in this process, because we want everyone to be able to take the test if they want to with an interpreter. So we still have the same translator process, where the translator has to be vetted by us and approved. They have to meet the same qualifications. They still have to apply through us to be a translator for this person. And then when the person schedules to take their exam, they notify PSI that they are taking it with a translator. And we at CSLB are having them in a private room, so they are in there in a private room so that the translator can speak out loud and it's not going to interrupt other candidates. And we are paying for a proctor to sit in there and observe them to make sure that they're just doing what they're supposed to do. They are reading the question, reading the 4 answers, letting the person answer, not providing any aid of any sort beyond what they are supposed to be doing, which is reading the question and the answers.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Seeing none?
I have one question. It's only been, has it been there any bumps in the road?
There have been a few bumps in the road.
Hi, Phil Vermeulen. I had a client today from Canada, had to make 2 trips from Canada. One for the business law, they couldn't do both at the same time. So, I mean, we're seeing more and more of that. That's very concerning. I mean, because we have a lot of clients from other states that are coming in and have to make 2 round trips to take a test is absurd. So I was just mentioning this to Registrar folk too. So that is a problem. But I will keep you posted too, because it is new.
And I have one more comment, because I think we brought this up at the last board meeting. I know it's new, and the transition was July 1st. So at the next meeting, could we have an assessment of what the cost is, the comparison, as much as you have at that point? All right, thank you.
Step on up.
Nick Forschetti, we work with PSI quite a bit on behalf of our clients, and they have specific people dedicated to certain states, it seems like, and they are having making some changes in their system to log in. I think that should really be looked at in detail. And when Phil mentioned his Canadian client, it reminded me of an issue that we've had in terms of, you're talking about the immigration and migrants in 1.1. A lot of the CSLB requirements that these people named on the license be U.S. citizen is a major hurdle to people coming in from out of the country that we've experienced. Is that no longer a thing? They have to have a social security number?
No,
or-
it's they don't have to be a
But it
it's
takes quite a while to get an
ITIN or SSN.
But it takes quite a while to get an ITIN, and these guys have no idea that's an issue when they call me. And I don't think there's really much education on that, on the board's information.
Okay, any other questions or comments? From the Licensing Division Strategic Plan items. Moving on to page 103, licensing update. I will highlight a few items for the board. Regarding applications, the packet on page 104 indicates the processing time for all application types. Currently, processing times are between 3 and 4 weeks. The goal is to drop all processing times below 3 weeks and maintain this level. To address staff turnover, staff cross-training is a priority. I would also like to report that the number of pending applications on page 106 has been significantly reduced with the transfer of test administration to PSI exams in July of 2022. As you can see on the chart on page 107, the number of incoming renewals continue to be steady. We are pleased to inform you that renewal processing times are currently at 1 week. The short processing time is a combination of the unit being fully staffed and licensees taking advantage of our online renewal service. On page 111, you will note an update regarding CSLB's license application experience verification program. As the package states, CSLB of course verifies the experience of all applications for licensure. Yeah. CSLB also has a special rule that requires CSLB to randomly review 3% of applications and perform a field investigation of stated experience. At the last few board meetings, staff informed the board that this program was suspended during the pandemic. Today, staff wants to update the board that a special investigator in Southern California has been identified to take the lead in resuming the 3% field investigations of applications next month. Finally, please note the call wait times on page 112 for the CSLB Licensing Information Center. The Licensing Information Center, or LIC, has filled vacant positions, including a supervisor position, which helps the workload monitoring. In addition, telework schedules have been modified for more consistent coverage. As the result of these changes, CSLB has significantly reduced LIC wait time. You can find the testing update on page 116. CSLB completed transitioning to PSI exams on July 1st. As of August 11th, 2022, PSI exams has administered 4,280 exams, and there are 3,748 exams scheduled. Currently, there are no backlogs in testing. Applicants can take their tests at 20 PSI test centers in California. PSI offers after-hours and weekend scheduling as well. Finally, the Exam Development Unit has held numerous remote workshops to continue occupational analysis work for updating existing exams. That concludes the licensing and testing update. Carol is available if the board has any questions.
Through the chair, I will say this, just like what the public comment stated, that there is a lot of agencies that really help, that's their business model, to help people get licensees. And unfortunately, some of the stuff internally we need to work on trying to get our information out there a little bit easier so the licensees themselves can help get these questions answered. Not to say that that's not a great service that's being provided, but unfortunately, we be able to do that in-house would probably be good for the consumer as a whole. And then secondly, I just found out about this too, just for everyone's reference. If you are applying for a license, there is an online link on our webpage that shows exactly your time frame of where you are within the application process. So I wasn't even aware about that myself, but it's actually really good for the consumers to know on that. So just more of a comment than a question.
Yes, Dan.
I'd just like to know, how are the locations determined, these 20?
Carol? I defer it to Carol.
When we moved to PSI exams, we came in under a master contract that DCA already had for the administration of their exams, and that master contract had these 20 locations. So these 20 locations are, as far as I understand, dedicated to giving DCA and CSLB exams. So it includes, barbering, cosmetology, funerary board, all of those. But that's why these were chosen, is because those are the ones that were already listed in that master contract.
Are we open to adding more? Is that a
I am open
possibility?
to adding more.
And the reason that I asked that, I asked that question because I see nothing here for Los Angeles.
Well, Los Angeles is covered, but it's not like LA itself, but Diamond Bar is in that area, Rancho Santa Fe is a little bit farther out, Agora Hills is up in Malibu. Did not know there were that many candidates in Malibu, but there are a lot of people who choose Agora Hills. So it's like not LA itself, but surrounding areas are covered, Lawndale, yes.
And Carol, how does this compare to the number of open locations we had?
Yeah, we did the best we could with the budget we had, but that's the budget we had as a state agency. So moving from 7 to 20, as I say, our candidates have been very happy about it. They have been pleased.
And I'm pleased that we have so many, but I've talked to contractors like in the area where I live, and nothing on here is within. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, Glenn.
Quick question. I believe PSI is nation, any PSI test center across the U.S.?
The initial contract was for California. We have asked them, I have asked them about nationwide. We are not sure exactly how many candidates we have nationwide. We're still working on determining the numbers to see whether or not it would justify adding to the cost, and especially the cost of sending our booklets out there and them having to buy additional storage to cover all of our booklets for all of our exams.
So it costs more than per center because of the
Yeah.
materials? Okay, thank you.
Registrar Foe.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a work in progress, so we're looking to continue to have dialogue with PSI and talk about whether we need additional to PSI, and they do have that service available in other states. So that's all something that we're going to be looking at as this program proceeds.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the board?
All right, I have one more comment. I probably will be the last in this transition because I know how difficult it was. And it impacts so many people. So we talked about this for years. I know there was a contract and bumps in the road and all that, but staff at CSLB needs to be commended for that. Because I just remembered there was a time not so long ago, our board meetings were filled with how are we going to deal with 11,000 training sessions backlogged. We couldn't train anyone, and all the energy that went into how are we going to solve this. So you guys did a great job, and I just wanted to commend them. So thank you.
Anyone else from the board? Anyone from the public care to comment or have a question? Step on up.
PSI is a private business enterprise, and so they rely on individuals to apply to have a testing center and be proctors. So they only have so many people at those resources throughout the country, right? So you may not be able to staff or put your exam in every single test center that they have. It's just going to be what you can afford to do, what they can afford to do, what's available to them.
Hi, Gal Bigalaisen, RMO agency. I have a question about the fingerprinting, the live scan. Does that occur at the PSI centers, or is that usually something you clear before they take the exam?
Carol?
They are still required to live scan, and that is something we are still doing at CSLB. So as part of their whole licensure process, because, I mean, the exam is the big part for many people in their mind, but it's not just you have to take and pass your exam. You do also have to do the live scan, and you have to have your bond in place and your workers' comp and everything. So it's still done at CSLB. It's still part of our process, and it is still required.
The reason I'm asking that is that it could help Phil's clients coming in from Canada or from other states if they could do their live scan, because I know that sometimes you do the hard copy if they are out of state. So if you are able to incorporate the fingerprinting as a part of that, that's one trip for them that they can test and fingerprint.
Something to look into.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other public comment? Question? Okay, well then, moving on. On information on the test administration centers. The process of outsourcing CSLB exam administration to the vendor PSI exams was completed July 1st. CSLB has moved 47 written examinations to PSI. Overall, the process is running smoothly. As of August 11th, 2022, PSI has administered 4,280 CSLB examinations to applicants and 3,748 more are scheduled. In addition, on the IT side of things, the programming process for system communication between CSLB and PSI is ongoing. CSLB closed all its test centers July 1st, 2022. Carol will be providing additional information.
I was like,
I heard
they-
silence, I was like, am
yeah.
I repeating myself?
But I did want to second what Susan said. Thank you so much to CSLB staff. This was a huge amount of work on the part of our IT division and licensing and testing, and especially the call center and front counter when we initially went over there, and to PSI's programmers for all the work they did on their side, trying to get all of our stuff to talk to all of their stuff. So I just wanted to say thank you really quick, publicly, to everyone involved with this.
Well, like they say, moving on. Page 124, for information regarding licensing reciprocity. Chair Tykert appointed Miguel Galarza and me to a two-person reciprocity advisory committee. Miguel and I met on August 12th to review a recently received request from Mississippi for reciprocity consideration for the general building trade exam. Mississippi accepts the NASCLA accredited examination for commercial building as well as administers their own examination. This examination item, this agenda item relates to applicants that have passed the NASCLA exam and not the Mississippi developed exam. I have been advised that on August 8th, 2022, staff met with the Department of Consumer Affairs Office of Professional Examination Services, otherwise known as OPES, regarding their prior review of the NASCLA General Builders Examination and the Mississippi Developed and Administered Exam. OPES has not reviewed Mississippi's Developed General Building Exam at this time. OPES confirmed their review of the NASCLA exam and report to the board in 2017 that NASCLA's exam was substantially the same as CSLB's general building exam, thereby in compliance with the Business and Professionals Code 7065.4 criteria. The request before you today relates to the NASCLA exam only. Per standard practice, staff will continue to request that OPES review any trade exam subject to a reciprocity request to confirm it is substantially related to the CSLB trade exam. OPES recommendation will then be reviewed by the licensing committee prior to being placed on the full board agenda. This request has been placed on today's agenda without first being reviewed by the licensing committee because OPES has evaluated the NASCLA exam and the board has previously approved the trade exam for reciprocity requests. As your board packet states, in April of 2018, the board approved staff accepting reciprocity agreements for applicants from states that have passed the NASCLA commercial building examination, if those states agree to accept CSLB's general building exam. The applicant must take CSLB's law and business exam and comply with all other licensing requirements. The CSLB currently accepts reciprocity via waiver of the trade examination for applicants from Louisiana who have passed the NASCLA commercial building examination. For some recent reciprocity statistics, I will turn to Mike Jamnetsky.
Yeah, we just have this note on the bottom of page 125 that we're going to provide you some updated licensing reciprocity complaint information. When we last reported reciprocity, we're 40% less likely to receive a complaint. So we ran some new numbers from January 2019 to now. There were 102 applicants who received the exam waiver of the trade for reciprocity. 76 of those are licensed, so they're whatever the difference is, some are still pending. 76 were licensed. Of those 76, 3 had complaints. And of those 3, 1 was insignificant and 2 went to a letter of admonishment. So the highest level of discipline was a letter of admonishment. So I just thought we'd update the board on that.
Thank you, Mike. It is Miguel and my recommendation, the board directs staff to enter into reciprocity agreement with Mississippi for waiver of the California General Building Trade Exam, Commercial General Builders Exam, and meet the other criteria specified in Business and Professions Code 7065.4. The additional criteria includes a requirement that the applicant's license was in good standing for the previous 5 years. It is also important to note that reciprocity with the other states benefits California licensees because the other state must waive the trade exam for California license applicants. As a result, and in accordance with the board's April 2018 acceptance of the NASCLA commercial building examination, the board may want to consider the following motion. Direct staff to pursue a reciprocity agreement with the state of Mississippi in accordance with Business and Professions Code 7065.4 criteria that have passed the NASCLA Commercial General Builders Exam. Are there any comments? I'll entertain a motion.
I guess I have a couple comments. So this particular, there's some numbers being thrown out of the numbers of Mississippi or Louisiana to California. What is the numbers the opposite way? Kind of the first question. And then I'll ask that one first.
Sure, so the numbers you heard about, the 76, are not state-specific to either Louisiana or Mississippi. It's just anyone who's received the trade waiver, so it would include any of the states we have reciprocity with. As far as to California contractors going out to other states, I do not have that data, but I will report, I'll research and see if we can report back.
Okay, thank you. And then a second question then. So help me understand this. I wasn't part of 2018 in the board when they did the reciprocity originally. So the exams are pretty much the same exams for the most part, or they cover the same amount of matter, right? So if someone passes in Mississippi, it's pretty much the same exam as it is in California and vice versa, right?
Yeah, if I could comment on that. The CSLB has a long-standing history of assisting NASCLA with exam development, and the board years ago, not all states have a trade exam. Carol Gagnon is our representative with NASCLA in helping to develop trade exams. So if you have a state that doesn't have one, Carol would be part of that process in developing the exam. Now, prior to Carol, we had, I think, who was our representative before you? Wendy Belvance. So for years, Wendy Belvance was part of the exam development process. Also, NASCLA has looked for California licensees to play a part in exam development. And I don't recall the term they use for this, but they have a guy named Brian Mortish, who's really well respected from California, that takes the lead in developing these trade exams. So when we talk about the NASCLA General Building exam, California played a vital role in developing that. And so when that came before the board back in 2017, that exam was reviewed by Heidi Lenser. And Heidi Lenser at one time was the manager over, she had the position that Carol has now, so she was over exam development now. She's currently at the Department of Consumer Affairs. So Heidi took the lead in reviewing that, and she made the presentation to the board where she explained that commercial general building exam was substantially the same as CSLB's, not exactly, and the board had to understand that they were going to be approving something that wasn't exactly the same, but it was substantially the same. And I think what Mike talked about is he talked about licenses issued within the last 3 years based on a reciprocity agreement. And I'm not sure, because the numbers I saw, Mike, maybe it's 75. I understood there were 75 applications submitted and 56 that became licensed, but maybe it was 75. So it's not been a great deal of reciprocity requests. Now, the benefit to California is that we, in my experience, have had more contractors going to other states trying to get a license than coming to California. In fact, some states we don't have reciprocity with, like South Carolina, they routinely contact our record certification unit for records on our licensees to waive the trade exam. But we can certainly do more research into that. And I don't know if Carol has more information regarding reciprocity requests. Who would probably have that data would be our record certification unit, and they're not represented here today.
Are there any?
Thank you. That answers the question of making sure that the trade exam is pretty much substantially the same. You know, obviously, I have individuals here who have, and that was just my only worry, that if our exam is substantially harder, are we making it easier for a Mississippi contractor to come into California and do business? But it sounds like that's not the case. And all of our other license requirements would still be the same. This is just the trade examination portion.
Yeah, if I could just reaffirm what David Del Torre said, that an applicant, it still needs to meet all the minimum requirements of this state. Past that, they're going to still have to have the experience that qualifies them to sit for the exam, and they would have to have the workers' comp or currently an exemption. They'll have to have a license bond. They have to meet all the other requirements. They have to obtain a license in California to do work in California.